everyone, and welcome to Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails, the weekly podcast that helps you grow your business, improve your life, and enjoy yourself along the way. I'm your host, Alan Langer, and every week we try to bring you the best thought leaders, the best business leaders, and the best minds out there to help you succeed in business and in life. So sit back, relax, grab your pad, your pen, and your favorite beverage, and enjoy the next episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. This is your host, Alan Langer, with episode number 43 coming at you tonight. And we're coming at you from way high in North America, Vancouver, actually, where we have Bibinaz Onsori with us. And I'm just going to call her Bibi because I am going to completely butcher her first name if I try to say it again. I'm glad I got it right the first time. But before I introduce Bibi, a couple of quick notes that we always go over at the beginning of the podcast. The website for the podcast is marketingandsalespodcast.com. Go to the top of that page and hit the Ask Alan segment. That'll prompt you to send in a question. If I read your question on the air, and we've got a good question coming up from Laura later on, you get a free signed copy of my book. So do that. Send me questions. I love all the questions I get. Send me comments, whatever you do. Don't send me any hate mail. I haven't gotten any of that yet, but send me. I love to be in touch with my listeners. So, without further ado, Bibi, how are you tonight?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I shouldn't say tonight. It's 2:00 in the afternoon for Bibi. So she has coffee. Unfortunately, it's 5:00 for me. So I have a tequila. Yeah. I'm enjoying a tequila. So anyway, you have to toast me even if you have a coffee.
Of course.
So virtual toast to the camera. Bibi, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into it, let me tell the folks why you're here. This is a little bit of a different show tonight because we've all, I talk about sales, I talk about marketing, but everybody that has been listening consistently knows I kind of drift off the path every now and then because I'm all about overall health and success for your business. Whatever that, that doesn't mean always just, okay, how do I do marketing the best? How do I do sales the best? And a lot of it has to do with your mental attitude as well and helping getting through some things. So Bibi is an anxiety coach that really helps professionals deal with anxiety. So tell us a little bit about that, Bibi, and how you got to what you're doing today.
So I was an interior designer for 15 years, and I was actually in sales. I love sales. And the whole time, though, I was in my professional life, I had really bad anxiety. So I had about 10 years, I was battling with really crippling anxiety, but my anxiety was that I had a phobia of getting cancer. And yeah, it's very different, but it was really bad. And even though I was traveling the world for my career and I was doing really well and everything was great, this anxiety was such a big damper on my life. And, I went to so many different professionals, but I was not able to heal my anxiety. And I was also so good at numbing it that I could really go on with my daily tasks and do a great job in my career. But inside, I was dying of anxiety every day, all day. And that's kind of the dangerous part with anxiety. Sometimes you can really numb yourself out to it and still be fully functional, but not really living in the moment at all. And so finally, I found a coach who really knew what to do with anxiety, and she was able to heal my anxiety. And so that's where I found my purpose, and everything changed for me. And I decided that, I want to become just like her. And I want to make sure I can help people who are suffering and their anxiety, and so that they can live their best life. And that's why I'm here today.
So was she a psychologist or was she an actual coach?
No, she was just a coach.
That's amazing.
Amazing. And I went to 25 different psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists. I didn't get results, but then I was blessed to find her. She saved my life. So,
wow.
Yeah. So that's why I dedicated my life to doing this now, and it's my mission.
That's a pretty powerful person to not only heal what you were suffering from, but to actually find your life mission as well. That's really
I mean, she's like my guardian angel, I always say, but she's amazing. Yeah, it's so true because And it's so important because, you know, she had the power. I mean, of course, with my commitment too. And I think that's the big part. You have to be committed to wanting to be better and get better.
Right.
But she had the tools to really help change my life around. So I will always be grateful for that. And that's not what I like to do for other people, because I feel like no one needs to live in the suffering of anxiety, which is terrible, because I've been there.
Well, I have a couple of kids. All three of my kids have some form or another of ADHD, but one of them actually has anxiety plus ADHD. And when she was very young, you know, when kids are young, they can't really explain what's wrong with them. They just act out. And the best description I ever heard, when she was 5 years old, the psychologist asked her how her body felt. She said, "My body feels like popcorn." And that's when I understood anxiety. Like that must have been an awful, awful feeling.
Oh, it's the worst. It's the worst. I mean, and it's so different for every person. But at the end of the day, it's a huge blockage. It's stopping you from living your best life. It's stopping you from so many things, you know, getting in a good relationship or reaching the next level in your career. Or for me was like every day I was like imagining my funeral, you know, every day I was checking my body for tumors and where do I have the cancer? How can I catch it early? So that's not living. No,
not at all.
Right. So
the people you help, what do they come to you mostly about? Is it professional anxiety, or are you kind of all over the place with personal, professional, or does it really kind of fall under one umbrella?
I think it falls under one umbrella because when we have anxiety, it starts to leak into other areas of your life, right? If you have fear of judgment, which is very common for my clients, they have a hard time speaking up in meetings or sharing their opinions, or they have a great idea, but they're so afraid to be judged that they're not going to say anything. Now that also leaks into their relationships. You know, they want a wife or they want a boyfriend or they want a husband, but they have fear of judgment. So for them to go socialize, it's putting themselves out there and they can't do it. Right. It's hard for them. So I believe that, you know, when you have one type of anxiety, it starts to leak into all areas of your life. It's not just one area. And that's why it's so important to heal it. Everything starts to shift.
Now, are you saying it can be healed without medication, or is it a combination of therapy, coaching, and medication?
I'm totally against pharmaceutical drugs myself, but I have a lot of clients who I don't work with any medication. I help clients heal it completely naturally, but I do work with a lot of clients who are already on medication, which I always say, like, I'm not a doctor. You know, that's something for you to figure out with your doctor. And I say, if it's helping you, that's great. If it's helping you live a better life, that's great. But at the end of the day, I have too many clients who were on medication and still had anxiety. So I see anxiety medication as somewhat of a Band-Aid, right? Yeah. It's not really healing the root cause of the problem.
So what would you say, and this could be a broad question because this is, you know, fairly foreign to me, this whole subject. Are there specific root causes that are common? Or, you know, you hear a lot of anxiety is, you know, you hear that it's a chemical imbalance in the brain, or, you know, it's a psychological impediment. Like, what do you see that may be some of the root causes in anxiety?
The root cause always falls into childhood, and it's always around the age between 5 to 13.
Wow.
Always. Like when we get to the root, it could be trauma, or it could be, you know, something negative that happens in someone's life, or maybe something not even so negative happens, but the way your take is on it at that age, it could be the decision you make based on what happens. It could start to affect your life negatively and start to build the anxiety and build beliefs around it for yourself. Like I had a client who actually had terrible social anxiety, but it's interesting because his social anxiety, for example, was because growing up, his mom was always kissing him and hugging him and telling him how amazing he is and just like smothering him with love. So he grew up, and obviously people in public wouldn't do that. They're not going to come up to you and kiss you and tell you how amazing you are. So
if they don't want to get arrested.
Right, exactly. So for him, that was the anxiety. Like, why aren't people kissing me and telling me how amazing I am. So he built all this social anxiety around it now because he felt awkward around people because they weren't doing that.
That's fascinating.
Right? Isn't it amazing? So even the mother who did everything, he made a decision of something else, right?
Wow. So she thought she was doing everything the right way, showering him with love, when really it was coming out to be
a little too much love then. And then now
a little too much. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't really base it on that. I think for everyone, the root cause is so different. But what I see in the work that I do, it's always going back to childhood between the age of 5 to 13.
All right. I'm going to say something. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to say something on the air that not too many people know, but I'm going to say it because for me, it doesn't really interfere with my life, but it's almost at a point where it's very curious and fascinating to me. This is about myself. So ask almost anyone you talk to, they remember their middle school years, their sometimes kindergarten, second grade, third. They remember their teachers. Oh, I remember my third grade teacher. I hear that all the time. I have zero memory of any schooling before sixth grade. I remember the outside of the building. I remember the school I went to. I remember the playground. I do not remember a teacher, a hallway, a book, a classroom, nothing before sixth grade. So I'm going to sign up for some treatment from you or what?
So I'm very similar to you, and my sister is very similar. We're also, when we think about our childhood, we can remember little flashes of things, but not like to the amount some other people can too. It's still there, but it's in your subconscious mind.
Right.
But you could be the type of person that you could actually not remember something if you don't want to. But that doesn't mean it's not there. Or if it wasn't any value to you or you don't see it as important.
Right.
You could just kind of write it off, but doesn't mean that if you do like deep trance work or deep meditation in your subconscious mind, it's not there.
Well, yeah, I'm assuming it's there. What I'm like, people have said, why don't you just get hypnotized or try to figure it out? I'm like, well, it's not like I'm having nightmares. I'm not like, having night terrors or anything. It's just that I just find it fascinating that I remember everything outside the building. I remember all of that. I remember my friends and holidays and all that stuff. And then when sixth grade starts, I remember everything, teachers but inside. So I'm just thinking maybe something traumatic happened to me inside that building that I buried. So, but do I want to find that out? Probably not. But I just find it really interesting.
Yeah, so. It could have been like, I can be very good at making something vanish from my mind. Now, that doesn't mean it's not there anymore. I'm good at tossing it to the very back, right? I've done that about my childhood, that I could have been like all the way to the end. But then I brought it back forward because I had to heal anxiety. But a lot of times, if you don't have something poking at you like anxiety and you don't feel like there's an urgency for you having to go heal something or get to the bottom of something, you probably will never go open that box, right? Because you're fine as it is. I never
saw the reason too, because like I said, it's not like I don't have debilitating anxiety. I mean, you get anxious every now and then, but I've kind of, at my age, it's weird. Like I get this one particular feeling that I have in my body, and I never knew what it was until I finally figured it out about 10 years ago, that when I got this one feeling, I was anxious about something, and I would have to stop, sit down and say, okay, what am I anxious about? And sometimes it was like something that happened 4 days ago that has just been bothering me, and I didn't realize it. So, but it's this very specific feeling I get, and every time I get it, I know something is wrong, and I have to figure out what it is.
And that feeling is usually, if you go deeper into it, it's like a fear. It's a fear-based feeling usually with anxiety. It's a fear of something. And a lot of times when I talk to people, so what causes you the anxiety? I don't know. But I don't know is actually like the most comfortable word for I don't want to go there. So a lot of times when in my program, I ban people from saying I don't know. I said, tell me anything else, but I don't know. But it's always fear-based. Like if you really dig deep, there's some sort of underlying fear.
Okay, so let's talk about, we do have business people here, and let's talk about business anxiety. We've got a great question coming up about almost that topic later on, but what do you see in business professionals, the anxiety? Is it the anxiety to succeed? Is it What are you seeing out there, and that are people approaching you to get help with?
Fear of failure is very big. Fear of judgment is really big in business. Fear of the unknown. A lot of people are scared of that. And I think those are all, again, you can enter the business world and sales, it's intense. Like, you have to be confident, you have to be good, you have to be on top of it. So it can be a very anxious space, right? But I always say, if you're working on your mindset and mind, body, and soul is doing good, you can be in any situation and not feel anxiety. You won't let the situation control you. You'll control the situation. And that's the thing, I think, with business as well. I work with a lot of CEOs, a lot of directors, like people with big titles, right? And we really work to get to a place where they can control their thoughts rather than their thoughts control them. And they can feel grounded in no matter what's coming up. Anything can come up, but since you're grounded and you've done the mindset work and you're in a very stable spot, nothing can really phase you. And so you can function without the anxiety, because the anxiety will slow you down, right?
Of course, yeah. It sounds like the same concept of, you can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you react to it.
Yeah. And it's totally about one thing to say it, but one thing to truly live from that place. Yeah,
it's hard to do.
Right, because you can read that quote all day long for yourself and be like, okay, and do it and be like, oh my God, I feel better. But it's like the situation happens and you're like,
you're totally reacting to it.
Right. But if you can get your mindset to a place that you truly get it and you're living it and you're fine, then any situation can truly happen. I mean, I've had some really, really bad things happen to me the past 6 years, but I didn't get any anxiety over it anymore. Okay, I cried or I was sad or all those things, but I didn't go into anxiety mode. I was still in charge of the situation.
Is a panic attack anxiety? This classic panic attack that you hear people.
Yep. So anxiety, if it's not taken care of, it can persist and grow, and it can get into panic attacks for sure. And then from too many panic attacks, you can now then get panic disorder, which is then you start to fear having panic attacks.
Oh boy. Wow.
It can go just like starts here and go all the way down.
The phobia can get worse. Well, speaking of phobias, in my book, I did a tongue-in-cheek. I named the fear of meeting with a salesperson, because everyone hates meeting with a salesperson. So I called the fear of meeting with a salesperson riptotrustophobia. And it's actually what people love it. And they always, when I get emails on my book and stuff, like, I love riptotrustophobia. I've had it since I've been 10, stuff like that. So everybody has it because no one wants to meet with a salesperson. So
I love that.
I'll send you a copy of the book. You can read about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love sales. So I was in
talk
sales.
About you. So you said you came from a sales background. Tell us about your years in selling.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the 15 years that I was doing interior design, I was actually mainly in sales. So I would work for really high-end brands. And so my job was to really find a client, do the whole I was like the in-house designer for big brands, and I would design their whole house. And then I would have to sell products to them to make sure they get as much as possible from our brand. So I was in sales for a very long time, and I loved it. I think selling is a talent, though, know, not everyone can be a good salesperson, but I really enjoyed it. And I love numbers. I love having a target and having to meet the numbers and getting there. I just find it so fascinating. I really, and the world is run by sales. So everything is sales. Well,
that was the amazing conundrum that I was trying to figure out when I first wrote my book. I was like, because I've been in sales for 27 years. And it was like, people need stuff. You need to buy stuff. You need to buy that lamp behind you. You need to buy the couch, but they don't want to meet the person who sells it. So like, how does stuff get sold that's why online sales are, or what they are, because people don't have to deal with another salesperson. But the concept of I have to buy this, but I don't want to meet with somebody actually causes anxiety. It's like when you go into like the car dealership is a prime example. Like people don't want to go to a car dealership because it causes anxiety because they don't want to deal with the pressure of the salesperson. So
because I think there are bad salespeople out there. Like
100%,
it's just the reality of it, right? Too desperate, too clingy, too obvious that I'm dying for this sale. Too many questions, not building rapport, not building a relationship and trust first. So people can smell that from like miles and miles away. So once they have an experience like that, it starts to feel kind of icky, like, oh, I don't want to go see another salesman. So it kind of creates a bad rep they get the phobia. And it kind of creates a bad rep for the good salespeople out there.
Absolutely.
Because if you're a good salesperson, you first, more than anything, I'd say you work on rapport and building trust and a relationship with the person. Then they'll buy anything from you. Yeah,
absolutely. Because they'll not only buy anything from you because you're building the rapport and the trust, but you're actually not the salesperson that they were expecting. You're like the anti-salesperson. You're like, oh my God, this guy's actually, asking me proper questions and he cares about what I think and not just trying to take my money.
Exactly. And I think, I remember when I worked in London, I was working inside Harrods and I was a designer for them. And it was like the end of the month and I hadn't sold anything. And I was freaking out because we were like only commission based, right?
Of course, yeah.
And I was like, and I'm like living in London. It's so expensive. And I was like, oh my God. I went to work and I was like desperate.com, like here she comes. Like, I need to sell something. And then my boss looked at me. He's like, Bibi. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you're really desperate today. Go home and come back tomorrow. And I was like, go home, come back tomorrow. Are you kidding? We only have 4 days left. You're sending me home. And he was like, because when you're this desperate, you're not going to sell anything. So it's better to be at home. And I grabbed my bag and I was like, oh, how dare he? He doesn't understand. Like I was freaking out. I went back home and I was like sitting on my sofa, like freaking out some more. And then I was like, whatever. So then I was like, okay, I have to work on myself. I can't be like this. I just surrender and trust and just like, it'll happen. And then the next day I went to work and I did a 75,000 pound order, but I wasn't the next day, but I wasn't desperate. And I was just like, I'm going to try my best. And so the people that I work with, I built a relationship and trust them, but like laughing. And I wasn't like, oh my God, I need to please buy this chair. Please buy, I was kind of like cool about it. So they were like, oh, I'll take this rug. I'll take that. I'll take this. And I was like, okay. And so it worked out, but it's true. Like that was one of the biggest lessons I ever got from my boss, that if you're desperate, it's better if you're not even here.
That is such a great sales story right there. I mean, that really is tremendous because your boss was 100% right and you experienced it and you lived it. And that's something you remember going forward. It's like, you know what? Because
it changed my selling game.
Amazing. I was
never desperate again because I was like, he was right. He was like, it's better to go home. If you're this desperate, no one's going to buy from you. They're going to run away from you.
Imagine. So take that example. I actually, there's a friend of mine on LinkedIn who does another podcast and he had someone on who had a very similar situation. And she was talking about how she was very new and she was nervous and she hated making cold calls. And what I think it was her sales manager told her to do was, instead of making cold calls, I want you to call 10 existing customers and ask them why they like doing business with us. And she did that and she got all positive and like, oh, this is good. We actually really good stuff. And she became their top sales rep. But she said that moment changed my entire sales life because I wasn't nervous anymore. And you had a sales manager who just changed your life. Imagine if both of those situations, you both had shitty sales managers and your guy said, sit down and plow through it. It would have been completely different.
Yeah, it would have been completely different. And I think that's also a pivotal moment because so I had my very first boss. I used to work in a dog store and she is like a genius when it comes to selling. I can't even tell you, I've never met a salesperson like her ever in my entire life. And when I first started working for her, I had to, she was making me call clients, right? And call them and so I would pick up the phone and I was like, oh, hi, how are you? And she was like, she would go to the back room and she would call me to pretend call, right? And I was like, oh, hi, how are you? And she was like, that's not how we say hi here. You have to say, hello, how are you? And I was like, oh, God. She did that with me like 30 times, you know? And
Wow.
I went home and I was crying and I was like, oh, my God. But she was really like putting pressure on me to call a certain way, to be a certain way. She taught me selling, though. But my character was the kind of character that I was like, I got to do it. I got to do it. I got to learn from her. But imagine if I had a different type of character. That could have been the end of it for me.
Yep. Yep.
You know what I mean? That could have actually traumatized me, and I would have never wanted to sell, and I would never want to work with another salesperson in my life.
Yeah. It just goes to show you how
case sensitive.
Yeah, how critical these moments are in your life, especially when you're younger, and the people you meet. You know, it's like that movie. I'm not sure if you ever saw the movie with Gwyneth Paltrow called Sliding Doors. You ever see that movie?
Yes, I love that movie.
You know, she goes in, she makes the train. Her life's different. She misses the train. Her life is completely different.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Same thing. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think this boss of mine, she really taught me selling, business, even who I am today in my business. I see her all the time still. And I always say, you are the person, you're the reason I am who I am in sales and in business today.
She still have the dog store?
Yeah, she does. She's super successful. She's one of those business people that are just like, whoa. So when you say, is it a pet store, or does she actually sell dogs? It's a dog boutique. She sells fashion for dogs.
Oh my God. I got to have her on my podcast.
You have to. I mean, I've never met a businesswoman like her. She is a genius when it comes to business.
You got to hook us up. I'm serious. I'd love to have her on my podcast.
I will, for sure. I will. Yeah, she's amazing. So, yeah, but I'm like, that could have, if it really depends on character too, because we did have people who worked for her and they couldn't stay there because they were like, whoa, you know? Of
course.
But I wanted to learn from her because I saw who she is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another great story. Wow. All right, before we get to our question, I want you to can you give the business people who are, who are listening, and if this is going into the question, then you can just say this is going to answer the question. But you have 2 or 3 strategies to deal with anxiety, like if they're feeling anxious one day, or there's something that, is there any techniques that you can impart?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, which is I tell people and they're like, oh yeah, I should do that. I think, in an anxious situation, or if life is hard in that moment or something is going on, take out a piece of paper and write down all of your wins. Everything that you've done so far in your life that is actually a win, remind yourself of it, right? Because we can be so hard on ourselves and be so mean to ourselves at times and do the automatic negative thinking and negative talking to ourselves. So it's so powerful when you can actually remind yourself of who you are, how much you've achieved, how far you've come. I think that really helps people get back to being grounded, and feeling calm. And remember who they are. Oh, I've done all of this. This is nothing. I've got it.
What a great point.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one because we forget to remind ourselves of how amazing we are, how far we are, how accomplished we are. And the other thing is practicing breathing. So this is something that helped me in my anxiety, which is doing diaphragm breathing. So not breathing into your chest, but breathing into your stomach. So you actually breathe in through your nose, but you breathe in a way that it expands your belly, not your chest.
Okay.
And so then you breathe out your mouth. This is such good breathing because it completely breaks the pattern in your mind of that anxiousness or panic.
Really?
Yeah. So taking a deep breath, and doing it with your eyes closed and doing it 3-4 times, you can see your anxiety will go
wow,
just right down. And now that doesn't mean it's going to heal your anxiety, but in that moment, it'll bring you back to level 0. And then I think the other one is that if you're in the moment of panic, find 3 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, and 3 body parts, move 3 body parts. So what this does in that moment of panic, it totally breaks your thought pattern, because you have to now focus on something else. I have to find 3 things I can see, 3 things I can hear, and moving like 3 body parts like that. And then you can see it breaks the pattern. Totally breaks the pattern.
Wow. That's really cool. I used to do something when my kids were younger, and I don't know what made me think of this one day. Maybe I read it somewhere or whatever, but when they had trouble sleeping, you do the normal count sheep and stuff like that, count backward from 100. But I would make them, I'm like, close your eyes and see if you can see the back of your eyelids, I would tell them. And they're like, what? Like, no, you have to look really hard because the back of your eyelids look like something. So try to find that. And they would forget about sleeping because they're looking for the back of their eyelids and they'd fall asleep. So I guess it's the same concept.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's breaking a pattern, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to sleep. I don't want to sleep. Like, can I watch a movie? And then you're getting them into a whole other pattern.
Right. Because they would always like, that's stupid. I can't see the back of my eyelids. I'm
2
like,
minutes
just
later,
try. And then literally in 3 minutes, they'd be asleep. So anyway, all right, let's get to the question of the week. This has been great, Bibi. All right, so this comes from Laura, and she's in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, which is a beautiful part of the East Coast. I've been there many times. Laura writes, Dear Alan, I absolutely love your show. Thank you, Laura. What would you suggest for me to do to overcome all the stress and anxiety I feel at the end of the month when quota hitting comes into play? Thank you very much for your great show. So what would you say to Laura for that question?
I think that, with quota and hitting targets and things like that, I think it's always a tough one, because I always say, and this is how I was when I was in sales, do the best that you can in that month. Try absolutely everything. Make sure that you're giving it your all. You're trying new methods. You're trying different things to make more sales. And at the end, if you're not meeting quota, what's the anxiety for? You did the best that you could. Mm-hmm. If you can sit securely with that I really did. I did call. I did follow up with everyone. I did go down my Excel sheet and touch base with people. I did try new methods. And if you're still not meeting it, you tried your best. And then the next month you'll try new things. But again, to bring anxiety and stress into that, it's out of your control. You can try your best, but you can't force people to buy. You can't force to meet sales. Like, if they don't want to buy, they don't want to buy. Or maybe you can find out what's missing. How could you do better? If everyone else in your team is meeting quota, but you're not, you've got some work to do. Now, that doesn't need to bring on stress and anxiety. Like, why do that? Mm-hmm. It's got to be some learning, some improving, and you'll get there. I think bringing stress and anxiety into situations like that is honestly a waste of emotion and a waste of time, as long as you're doing your best. Right. If you're not doing your best, well, yes, you're going to have stress and anxiety, because there's also guilt in that, because you didn't do your best. Right.
Exactly. Right. I would answer from my sales end to Laura to stop worrying about quota. Stop worrying about your numbers, because if all you're doing, Laura, is focusing on your numbers, you're always going to struggle to hit them. If you all you have to do is start concentrating on helping your customers and solving their problems, and you'll be shocked on how many quotas you'll hit. But the problem I see with most sales reps in my training is they're so focused, and this is the problem of the management, problem of upper level people saying we got to make 100 sales this month no matter what. You're stressing out your sales force. You've got high turnover rate because they all hate their jobs because they got to make 100 cold calls a week. All of those numbers-driven metrics drive salespeople to low self-esteem. And I think the last thing I read was like nationally 78% of salespeople miss their quotas, which is shocking. And it's because they're number-based. So stop focusing on your numbers, Laura. Start focusing on helping your customers, and I guarantee you'll do better.
Yeah, and I think another thing also, that's such a good point, because also I think something that is very common, and I think this goes up to leaders and management, they do so much comparison in meetings, and of course they're trying to like make people driven, this person did this, put all the numbers on the board.
Oh, it's great. Yep.
I don't agree with that. I think if a person's motivated, they're motivated, but
I agree.
I feel like don't allow those numbers to cause you stress and anxiety. Do the best that you can. Like you said, focus on the main mission, not so much on the numbers, and everything will flow right in.
Yeah, exactly. If just forget about the numbers just try it for a month or two, forget about the numbers. All you're concentrating on is, okay, how can I help Mrs. Jones today? What is her problem? This is how I'm going to help her. Because if you're like, oh, I got to sell Mrs. Jones today, it's a different conversation.
If you were desperate like me, don't be.
Yeah, if you were desperate like Bibi and you had a crappy sales manager, you're going to have a bad time. So, all right, this has been great. So, Bibi, how do people get in touch with you? I'm sure we got some people in the audience that may want to say hello or check you out. So where do they go to find Bibi Onsori? Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Good.
So I'm most active on LinkedIn. That's my main platform. But outside of that, they can go to my website. It's www.theinnerroommate.com.
The Inner Roommate. I love that.
Yes. Thank you.
I love that web address. That is awesome. So it's www.theinnerroommate.com. Roommate has 2 M's. Remember that. And she's also on LinkedIn, but she's under... I think if you type in BIBI.
If you type in anxiety, I come up.
Oh, okay, cool. And type in anxiety.
Right there.
Bibi comes right. That's awesome. All right. Well, if I ever have any anxiety, I'm contacting you. If I'm in Vancouver, I'll be there after 5:00, so you can join me for a little drink.
Yes, 1,000%.
All right, Bibi. Any last parting words for any of our listeners that you'd like to leave us with?
Yes, if you have anxiety, don't live with it. Heal it.
Oh, I love that. Well, on that note, Bibi, thank you very much for joining us on Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. And I want to thank you, my faithful audience, for joining us today on episode 43 of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. Remember, get on the website, marketingandsalespodcast.com. Ask me a question, and just like Laura in Old Saybrook, you will get a signed autographed copy of my book. Signed and autograph is redundant, but it means the same thing. So anyway, Bibi, thanks for joining us. Everyone out there, thanks for joining us. We will see you again next time.